Before this story tightens its grip, take a second to tap like, subscribe for more HFY sci-fi, and drop a comment telling us whose side you think the galaxy should fear more, the Council or humanity. Now let's begin. The Galactic Council called it a necessary precaution, which was how they labeled every mistake before it finished unfolding. In the high chamber where stars were reduced to pinpricks on translucent walls, representatives from 100 civilizations leaned away from a single hovering image. The apex predator filled the projection like a living eclipse, all layered armor and coiled muscle, its presence alone enough to quiet entire worlds. It was a creature credited with ending wars simply by appearing at the wrong battlefield, a biological inevitability that no treaty could tame. What unsettled the Council was not its size, nor the scars etched across its hide like a history written in violence. It was what stood beside it. A human child, no older than 6 standard cycles, sat on a stone step with legs swinging, utterly unafraid. One small hand rested against the creature's massive forelimb, fingers tracing grooves where claws could shear steel. The predator did not move. It watched the horizon instead, body angled subtly so that anything approaching the child would have to go through it first. Counselor Vethrix broke the silence, mandibles clicking in restrained agitation. This is unprecedented. The apex exhibits protective behavior. Toward a non-dominant species. Toward a juvenile. Correction, another voice said. Toward a human juvenile. That distinction rippled through the chamber like a microquake. Humans were not powerful by Council metrics. They held no ancient empires, commanded no bioengineered titans, and yet they appeared in incident reports with unsettling frequency, always near events that should have ended worse than they did. Commander Elias Rourke watched the same feed from a much smaller room on a much less important station. He had been human liaison to the Council once, long enough to learn how easily concern curdled into fear. Now he was something else. Protector, perhaps. Or witness to the moment when the galaxy decided to cross a line it would later pretend not to see. Rourke recognized the child instantly. Noah Hale. Colonial Registry, Frontier World Kepri 9. Population barely worth counting. No strategic value. No anomalies. Except that 6 months ago, a Council-sanctioned survey team had attempted to tag the apex predator on that same world. The team never returned. The predator stayed. The Council debated for hours, parsing philosophy and probability until the outcome felt inevitable. They could not allow a variable this large to exist without control. They could not negotiate with a creature that did not acknowledge hierarchy. They certainly could not tolerate the idea that a human child had achieved what their greatest strategists never had. The solution was outsourced. It always was. 3 mercenary fleets received the contract within the same cycle. Kill the apex predator. Collateral acceptable. Discretion preferred. The child was not listed as a target, but neither was he protected. To the Council, that omission felt merciful. To Rourke, it felt like a lie wearing a clean uniform. He opened a private channel, fingers hovering over controls he had sworn never to use again. The transmission cut through civilian bands, slipped past outdated encryptions, and reached a man planetside who had every reason to hate him. Jonah, Rourke said when the channel connected. They're coming. Jonah Hale did not ask who. He was a former engineer, a single father, a man who had crossed half a world with a broken ship and a frightened child because nowhere else had felt safe. He stood now at the edge of the settlement, watching the apex predator pace with restless precision. It had sensed something, that much was clear. I figured, Jonah replied. His voice was calm in the way that came after panic had burned itself out. How many? Enough, Rourke said. They think it's just an animal. Jonah looked down as Noah tugged at his sleeve, asking if the sky was going to fall. He knelt, brushed dust from his son's hair, and told him no. The sky had never scared him anyway. Noah's eyes were fixed on the great creature nearby, who lowered its head slightly so the child could rest a hand against its armored brow. The apex predator's breath rumbled, low and steady. Not a growl. A promise. Rourke watched the feed update as distant drives flared to life at the system's edge. Mercenaries inbound, confident and well-armed, carrying the Council's faith that overwhelming force solved every problem. He felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not dread but a quiet certainty. They were about to learn the wrong lesson from the right species. As the first ships crossed into local space, the apex predator lifted its head and turned toward the stars. It did not flee. It did not roar. It simply stepped closer to the child and waited, as if the universe itself had finally come to test what it was guarding. And for the first time in a very long time, humanity was not alone when that test arrived. The first flare appeared as a pale slash across Kepri 9's twilight sky, a signal that the mercenaries had arrived. Their ships were precise, angular, and unyielding, moving with the practiced confidence of beings who had never known restraint. Jonah Hale felt a chill, not from the cooling desert air, but from the certainty that the coming hours would strip the world down to essentials: predator, child, and those willing to defy both. From a ridge overlooking the settlement, Rourke adjusted the comlink, scanning for patterns. 3 mercenary factions, each with its own agenda, had arrived in near-perfect synchronization. There were the Clintar shock troops, clad in reflective bioarmor; the Voryx warhounds, their eyes glinting with a genetic coldness that made humans instinctively step back; and a human-led contingent, the most dangerous, because they understood human instinct and could exploit it. They all believed in one universal rule: apex predators could be broken. None expected the truth. Jonah crouched near the perimeter, fingers brushing Noah's shoulder. The child's small hands gripped a wooden figurine he had carved himself, eyes wide and unblinking. "Remember," Jonah whispered, "don't run. Stay with me." Noah nodded, though it was more an instinctive trust than comprehension. The predator moved deliberately, its great limbs silent against the rocky soil. Its movements were precise, economical, as though every stride had been calculated centuries before. Jonah watched, and in the rhythm of its motion, recognized something terrifyingly human: intelligence that did not need explanation. It was guarding not because it had been commanded, but because it had chosen. The first Clintar squad touched down beyond the ridge, deploying energy lances that painted the landscape in harsh blue. They scanned, unaware that the creature had already noted their presence. One step from the predator, and they would realize the difference between intelligence and instinct. Jonah exhaled slowly. He knew words alone would not prevent disaster, but speaking to the predator calmed him in the small way humans could only with the familiar. Rourke relayed coordinates, suggestions, warnings. "They'll probe from the north first. The child must remain unseen." Jonah adjusted his position, ensuring Noah remained between him and the approaching threat. The predator's head lifted slightly, nostrils flaring as it inhaled the scent of iron, ozone, and fear. It was no ordinary beast, and Jonah had no expectation it would act predictably, only that it would act logically. The Voryx scouts advanced next, moving in pairs, sleek and unnerving. They analyzed the terrain, calculating angles, weights, probabilities. Jonah's pulse quickened as he noted their approach, but the predator did not yet engage. It was waiting, watching, a storm held back by the smallest finger of human presence. Noah tugged at his father's sleeve, whispering, "Why aren't they scared?" Jonah could only shrug. The truth was frightening: they should be scared, and yet they were not. Suddenly, a Clintar operative fired a plasma charge too close to the predator's flank. The weapon ignited the air with a hiss, but before it could strike, the predator shifted. A single movement, fluid as water, and the shot detonated harmlessly against a rock. Jonah felt the hairs on his arms stand on end. This was no ordinary confrontation. The mercenaries believed in firepower, the predator believed in presence. Rourke's voice crackled through the calm, tense but controlled. "Jonah, it's moving to intercept. Keep the child clear." Jonah tightened his grip on Noah, who now pressed instinctively against the predator's side. The creature's massive head lowered, eyes locking on the nearest Voryx pair. It did not charge, it did not roar. It merely positioned itself so that any advance would require calculation, courage, and an acceptance of consequences the mercenaries had not anticipated. The human-led mercenary squad entered the fray next. Jonah recognized one of them: Callum Thorne, a former operative who had once betrayed human intelligence in the Outer Rim. Thorne's eyes met Jonah's through the scope of a long-range rifle, recognition flickering in both. Jonah's stomach tightened. This was personal. The child, the predator, and he were targets not just of policy but of old vendettas, reputations, and grudges. As the skirmish escalated, the predator did not strike indiscriminately. It moved between Jonah, Noah, and the closest threats with a methodical rhythm, each step measured to maximize protection. Where the mercenaries expected chaos, they found order. Where they anticipated fear, they encountered presence. Jonah realized with dawning clarity that this was not a battle of force, but a test of comprehension. They had underestimated something fundamentally human: the bond between the child and the being sworn to guard him. Rourke's hands flew across the controls, marking trajectories, predicting moves, warning Jonah when a flank became vulnerable. "They're recalibrating," he said. "They think they can outmaneuver it. They can't." Jonah swallowed, knowing the truth in that statement. The Predator's understanding of space, motion and consequence was alien in its precision, yet intimate in its protection. It had not been taught, it had chosen. Noah, oblivious to the technicalities, pressed closer, touching the Predator's shoulder. A low rumble resonated from deep within its chest, a sound Jonah could feel more than hear. It was a warning, a promise, a silent communication that left no room for misjudgment. Jonah held his breath, feeling the gravity of the moment. The mercenaries, armed with everything the council considered superior, were about to encounter the first human lesson. Protection is not weakness. The section concluded not with a roar, nor with a strike, but with a pause. The Predator lowered itself into a stance that suggested patience, resolve, and inevitability. The mercenaries hesitated, scanning each other for instructions, unprepared for the intelligence and choice they faced. Jonah knelt beside Noah, whispering, "Stay close." The child's small fingers gripped his father's sleeve, trusting the Predator's calm as much as Jonah's own guidance. Above the ridges, the first volleys of energy flared. Sparks danced on stone. Shadows stretched long and ominous. And the Predator, guardian of the human child, stood unyielding between the future of humanity and the mercenary fleets who thought themselves masters of the galaxy. The outcome remained uncertain, but one truth was undeniable. No mercenary had yet understood what they were up against, and the moment they did, the game would be over on their terms. Jonah looked to the Predator, and in that shared glance, recognized what the Council had ignored all along. This was not a beast. This was an apex mind bound by choice, and the humans it guarded were the key to a lesson the galaxy was about to learn. The desert wind carried the acrid scent of scorched metal as the first mercenary charge collided with the Predator's perimeter. Jonah Hale crouched behind a jagged outcrop, Noah pressed to his side, and for a moment the world seemed to contract to the three of them and the massive creature that had chosen to protect them. Every instinct Jonah had screamed at him to run, but he did not. Running would mean abandoning the child, abandoning the Predator, abandoning the fragile order that hung between life and annihilation. Rourke's voice came through the calm but urgent. "They're testing its limits. Keep the child still. Trust what you've seen." Jonah glanced at Noah, whose wide eyes reflected the chaos, yet held no trace of fear. Children were unpredictable, but Noah had something rarer, an unspoken bond, a connection with the Predator that neither words nor fear could sever. The Predator shifted closer, moving in a deliberate, almost ritualistic pattern. Its body was a landscape of scars and armored ridges, each mark telling stories of hunts and battles humans could scarcely imagine. Yet, it moved with a fluid grace that suggested strategy over reflex. Jonah realized that this creature's intelligence was not just tactical, it was relational. It understood the mercenaries' intent before they acted, predicting their moves in the same way a parent senses a child's next step. Above, the human-led squad advanced cautiously. Callum Thorne's expression remained unreadable, trained in the mercenary code that valued efficiency over morality. He gestured, and a volley of kinetic bolts arced toward the ridge where Jonah crouched. The Predator responded before Jonah could react, lunging with a speed that belied its size. Its massive forelimbs slammed into the rocky terrain, sending shards of stone flying and scattering the attack harmlessly aside. Jonah grabbed Noah and ducked lower, heart hammering. He had seen the Predator in close quarters, but witnessing its protective instinct in real time reshaped his understanding. This was no mindless animal, it was a sentinel with purpose, intelligence, and a loyalty that could not be bought or coerced. The mercenaries, for all their training and firepower, were beginning to realize that brute force alone would not secure victory. The Vorix contingent flanked from the east, calculating trajectories, positioning themselves for a lethal strike. Jonah traced their movements, mentally marking every angle. He understood the Predator's patience, its refusal to attack without cause, yet he also recognized the risk of hesitation. A single misstep could turn protective intent into catastrophe. "Hold," he whispered, more to himself than Noah, as the Predator's head turned toward the eastern approach, eyes narrowing. A sudden explosion erupted near the settlement. A plasma mine had detonated, throwing a column of fire into the sky. Jonah shielded Noah instinctively, expecting panic, but the child remained still, eyes on the Predator. In that moment, Jonah understood what the Council had failed to account for. Human adaptability under pressure was not just instinct, it was improvisation guided by resolve. The Predator mirrored that adaptability, adjusting stance, angle, and motion in perfect harmony with the humans it protected. Rourke's voice cracked through again, reporting losses among the mercenaries. "They underestimated it. They've already lost one squad." It's calculating. It's choosing every move. Jonah nodded, recognizing the truth in the assessment. This was no mere guardian. This was an apex entity, capable of independent thought, capable of evaluating threats with a clarity that humans and aliens alike had rarely witnessed. Jonah took a deep breath and considered the next step. The mercenary strategy was straightforward. Overwhelm the predator with numbers, isolate the child, and execute a rapid extraction. But the predator anticipated strategy as though it were a living algorithm. Every maneuver the mercenaries attempted was met with countermeasures that were both simple and devastatingly effective. Rocks and debris became shields, shadows became concealment, and the predator's sheer presence created hesitation among the enemy ranks. The child moved closer to the predator without prompting, hand resting on its armored flank. Jonah watched, understanding dawning. Noah was not merely safe, he was a component in a symbiotic defense. The predator's choice to protect was informed by instinct, yes, but also by an acknowledgement of human worth that defied council logic. It did not guard him because it had to, but because it recognized him as part of something larger, an entity worth safeguarding, a potential catalyst for change the galaxy could not yet comprehend. From the ridge, Jonah calculated the battlefield in real time, coordinating minor movements with the predator's positioning. He whispered directions, subtle gestures, small shifts that harmonized with the creature's own instincts. Together, human and predator formed a network of protection that rendered the mercenaries' overwhelming firepower ineffective. One misjudged step from the enemy, one hesitation, and the predator was there, displacing, intercepting, neutralizing without unnecessary aggression. A Vorax warhound fell back after a failed flank, its companions hesitating as if the predator's presence alone had altered the physics of fear. Jonah realized the lesson was not in force but in cohesion. The predator did not simply react. It integrated, coordinated, and adapted alongside the humans it had chosen to protect. Callum Thorne's face betrayed the first flicker of doubt, an acknowledgement that efficiency was no match for purpose. Night fell over Kepri 9, and the first stars appeared, distant witnesses to the unfolding conflict. Jonah knelt beside Noah, who traced the predator's armored ridges with small fingers, whispering questions about the lights above. Jonah could only answer that some things were too vast to understand fully, yet safe in their protection. Above, the predator's eyes glinted, scanning the horizon, measuring threat and opportunity in perfect balance. The mercenaries regrouped, exhausted, frustrated, their assumptions shattered by a being they could not predict. Jonah recognized the pattern. They would attempt a final coordinated strike before reinforcements arrived. The predator shifted its stance, low and coiled, not in aggression but in readiness. It had learned, adapted, and chosen the optimal moment to assert its dominance without endangering the child. Jonah tightened his grip on Noah's shoulder. "We're not just surviving," he whispered. "We're teaching them something they'll never forget." The child looked up at him, unafraid, trusting the judgment of both father and predator. As the first tentative steps of the mercenary assault began under the veil of darkness, the predator's gaze never wavered. It was a sentinel, a teacher, a force beyond expectation. And for the first time, Jonah understood what the council had dismissed. The predator was not a tool to be conquered, nor a weapon to be wielded. It was a choice, and in that choice humanity had found an ally that the galaxy would learn to fear. The night deepened, carrying with it the tension of imminent confrontation, but also a quiet certainty. The predator would not falter. The child would remain safe. And the humans aligned with it would continue to shape a conflict that the mercenaries, and the council, were unprepared to comprehend. In the stillness between volleys, Jonah realized that this was only the beginning, and that the lesson being written on Kepri 9's sands would echo far beyond its desolate plains. The first light of Kepri 9's sun glinted off jagged ridges, illuminating a battlefield transformed into a study of chaos restrained. The mercenaries had regrouped, but their precision was fractured, their confidence eroded by every calculated move of the predator. Jonah Hale crouched beside Noah, heart still hammering from the night's skirmishes, and watched as the creature adjusted its stance, muscles rippling beneath armored plates like liquid steel. It was waiting, not for attack but for understanding. Rourke's voice crackled through the comlink, tight with urgency. "Jonah, they're pushing in from 3 angles now. You'll need to coordinate civilians. Make use of the terrain. Don't let them isolate the child." Jonah nodded, scanning the valley below where small settlements clung stubbornly to rocky outcrops. The humans here were unarmed, fragile, and yet vital to the predator's strategy. They moved as shadows, guided by subtle gestures, avoiding lines of fire, and in doing so became an extension of the defense without knowing it. Callum Thorne led the human mercenaries forward, his face tense with disbelief. They had underestimated both intelligence and loyalty, and that miscalculation was rapidly unraveling their doctrine. Jonah realized the psychological weight Thorne carried. The man had once known human adaptability firsthand, yet now faced the manifestation of it in its rawest, most unyielding form. The predator did not just counter their attacks. It anticipated intent, exploited overconfidence, and forced hesitation where certainty had once existed. Noah stayed close, pressing against the predator's flank. There was no fear in his small posture, only trust, a quiet insistence that life would be preserved. Jonah found himself marveling at the symbiosis: child, father, predator, a triad of instinct, experience and choice that rendered the mercenaries' firepower inadequate. Every step Jonah directed, every suggestion Rourke made, aligned seamlessly with the predator's calculated movements, creating a choreography that the enemy could not read. The Clintar and Vorix contingents attempted synchronized strikes, plasma and kinetic volleys cutting arcs through the air. The predator's reactions were neither hasty nor violent. It moved with precision, intercepting attacks in ways that minimized risk to the humans and maximized disruption of the enemy. Jonah realized the elegance in its method. The predator did not merely defend, it controlled engagement, dictating tempo, forcing errors, and compelling the mercenaries to overcommit. From the ridge, Rourke analyzed the approach of the remaining mercenary forces. "They've adapted their strategy," he said. "They've learned from their losses but not enough. Watch for split maneuvers, they'll try to lure you out." Jonah nodded, positioning Noah behind a natural barrier as he plotted movement that mirrored the predator's rhythm. Every instruction he whispered reinforced the predator's choice to protect, creating a network of coordinated defense that amplified instinct with human ingenuity. A sudden explosion threw dust and fragments into the air as a Vorix squad miscalculated a flank. Jonah felt the tremor through the rocky ground and pressed Noah closer. The child's small hands gripped his sleeve, unshaken, as if instinctively aware that the predator's presence rendered danger relative. Jonah's mind raced. The mercenaries had power, numbers, and technology. Yet none of it could overcome a sentinel that chose protection over aggression, intelligence over instinct. Callum Thorne barked orders, frustration creeping into his tone. "Hold positions." "They cannot." His words faltered as one of his squads faltered under a perfectly calculated intercept by the predator. Jonah watched, knowing that hesitation had begun to seed doubt, and doubt was far more dangerous to mercenaries than fear. The predator's movements were deliberate, strategic, yet unforced. It did not need to strike hard, it only needed to exist with presence, compelling the enemy to misjudge every step. Jonah whispered to Noah, "Watch and learn." The child tilted his head, eyes following the predator as it positioned itself between an advancing Vorix squad and the settlement. The beast's immense body cast a shadow over the terrain, an unspoken assertion that this was its domain and that any trespass came at a cost. Jonah understood then the broader lesson. Humanity's strength was not measured in weapons, but in relationships forged by necessity and trust, and the predator had acknowledged that truth. The battle reached a crescendo as the mercenary fleets pressed their final coordinated assault. Jonah could feel the tension tightening like a drawn wire, ready to snap. The predator responded not with ferocity but with a calculated projection of presence. Each movement was a statement: protect, anticipate, adapt. Jonah guided civilians into defensible positions, ensuring the child remained unseen by hostile sensors, every action aligned with the predator's instinctive strategy. Above, orbital surveillance flickered as the council watched, uncomprehending. They had sent professionals to eliminate what they deemed a threat, only to witness the predator not merely surviving, but controlling outcomes with a logic and awareness that defied their calculations. Jonah glanced at Noah, who now crouched comfortably beside the predator, fingers brushing armored ridges. He realized that safety did not come from evasion or escape. Safety came from understanding, from choice, and from the unity of disparate beings against a common threat. The mercenaries faltered, their coordination fraying. Rourke's voice carried relief beneath its urgency. "They're beginning to break. Hold the line. Do not engage unnecessarily, let the predator dictate." Jonah exhaled slowly, heart still racing, and felt the weight of comprehension settle upon him. The predator was not a weapon to wield, it was a partner in defense, an apex mind acting with precision, guided by loyalty rather than mandate. As sunlight strengthened, the enemy's last attempts were repelled without loss to the humans or child. The predator's stance relaxed, muscles still coiled but no longer rigid. It had imposed order on chaos, chosen protection over destruction, and in doing so demonstrated a principle the council had long ignored. Intelligence allied with choice was superior to power alone. Jonah knelt beside Noah, brushing dust from his hair. The child looked up at him, trust unwavering, and reached out to touch the predator's flank. Jonah understood in that instant that this bond was more than survival. It was a lesson written into the very actions of those present. The predator had chosen, Noah had been protected, and the humans aligned with it had witnessed a force beyond comprehension, but one entirely capable of collaboration. The mercenary remnants retreated, disoriented and defeated, leaving the settlement untouched and the predator still vigilant. Jonah gazed across the valley at the enemy forces withdrawing, and knew the galaxy had been handed its first lesson in humility. Above, the council could only watch, unprepared to reconcile protocol with reality. And in the stillness that followed, Jonah realized that the battle had not just been for survival. It had been for understanding, for recognition, and for a truth the galaxy would soon be forced to acknowledge. Humanity did not merely endure apex threats, it could forge alliances with them, redefine them, and emerge stronger for it. The predator lowered its head slightly to Noah, a gesture of acknowledgement and assurance. Jonah met the creature's gaze and nodded, understanding the silent contract that had been enacted. Protection was mutual, loyalty was earned, and the future would be guarded with intelligence, instinct, and an unbreakable bond. The sun rose fully over Kepri 9, casting long shadows across the settlement, and the humans and predator alike prepared for what the next chapter would demand. The valley was quiet now, but not empty. Dust rose in lazy swirls, remnants of the night's conflict, as Jonah Hale stood with Noah pressed to his side, the predator towering nearby, a living testament to endurance and choice. The mercenaries had retreated beyond the ridges, leaving behind shattered vehicles, scorched ground, and the bitter lesson that force alone could never conquer intelligence or loyalty. Jonah allowed himself a moment to breathe, but the weight of what had transpired pressed on him. This was not a victory in the council's eyes, it was a revelation, and revolutions were rarely quiet. Rourke appeared on the comlink, face etched with exhaustion and exhilaration. They're regrouping, but their morale is broken. The council will respond, and not subtly. Jonah nodded, already anticipating the inevitable political storm. The apex predator had done more than protect a child. It had shattered assumptions, demonstrated strategy beyond human or alien expectation, and forced the galaxy to witness a truth it had long ignored. The human bond with life, even fragile life, was formidable in ways no weapon could match. Noah tugged at Jonah's sleeve, pointing toward the predator. Will they come back? His voice was small but steady, carrying neither panic nor ignorance, only trust. Jonah knelt, brushing dirt from the child's cheek. They might, he admitted. But we have something they can't take. Trust and the right allies. He let his hand rest on the predator's flank. The creature rumbled, low and resonant, a sound that conveyed more reassurance than words ever could. Jonah understood the depth of that connection now. The predator did not serve humanity, it recognized it. Callum Thorne's human mercenaries had disappeared into the horizon, but Jonah knew they would carry this experience with them, a bitter memory of strategy undone by a force they had refused to respect. The Clintar and Voryx would report back similarly, altering council narratives with reluctant honesty. Jonah felt a surge of pride not in himself, but in the child, the predator, and the unexpected alliance that had been forged in the crucible of necessity. The settlement stirred as civilians emerged from hiding, cautious but alive. Jonah directed them to form temporary perimeters, ensuring safety while assessing damage. The predator moved among them, not as a beast of burden or weapon, but as a sentinel whose presence conveyed both authority and protection. Jonah realized that this creature's lessons extended beyond battle tactics. It had taught humans to understand threat, respect intelligence, and embrace cooperation. Above the ridges, orbital sensors flickered with incoming communications. The council had dispatched envoys, urgent and unyielding, demanding reports, justifications, and the return of their prized contract. Jonah allowed himself a sardonic smile. They would find Kepri 9 occupied not by conquest but by guardianship, by the unpredictable resilience of human ingenuity allied with a force that could not be coerced. Rourke's voice interrupted his thoughts. Jonah, they're escalating. Reinforcements are inbound, but I think they're learning the wrong lesson. Jonah's gaze shifted to the horizon. He saw the distant glint of ships moving too cautiously now, their formation imperfect, anticipating the predator's intervention before they acted. Let them learn, Jonah said. We've survived this long because we don't play by their rules. Noah's small hand reached for the predator, and Jonah noted the subtle exchange that passed between them. Recognition, acknowledgement, and an unspoken pact. The predator's eyes softened, but its body remained coiled, ready. It had not fought to dominate, it had fought to preserve. That distinction, Jonah realized, would define the galaxy's understanding of what it meant to confront humanity. A sudden ripple across the valley announced the approach of council-backed reinforcements, but Jonah was ready. He signaled the civilians to positions optimized for defense, using terrain, elevation, and the predator's presence as force multipliers. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. Jonah had become more than a father or observer. He had become a strategist aligned with an apex mind, capable of orchestrating outcomes that no single force could predict. The predator stepped forward, massive limbs folding with predatory grace. It positioned itself between Noah and the valley, eyes locking on the first approaching fleet. Jonah felt the weight of inevitability. This was the climax, the confrontation that would define not just the outcome of Kepri 9, but the perception of humanity itself. He whispered to the child, "Stay close. Watch carefully." Noah's eyes shone, absorbing every calculated movement, every choice the predator made, learning without instruction. The reinforcements advanced, but the predator's presence was a vector of deterrence, a physical and psychological barrier no sensor, no ordnance, could pierce without consequence. Jonah coordinated the civilians and the terrain, directing energy in ways the mercenaries could not anticipate. The predator did not roar, it did not strike. It simply existed, and the weight of that existence bent the battle in humanity's favor. The first hostile vessel fired a pulse cannon, the ground shaking beneath the discharge. The predator reacted with precision, intercepting debris, displacing energy waves, and guiding Jonah and Noah into an optimal defensive stance. Jonah realized then that victory had never required dominance. It required alignment, understanding, and trust between human and apex force. Noah's small hand brushed the predator's flank again, and Jonah felt the culmination of everything that had led to this moment. Fear transmuted into courage, isolation transformed into alliance, and desperation crystallized into strategy. The reinforcements faltered, misjudging the predator's movements, their own lines unraveling under the combined influence of instinct and human ingenuity. Jonah knew the council would call this a miracle, but he understood the truth. Miracles were merely recognition of forces properly respected. As the sun climbed fully above the horizon, the final strike of the reinforcements dissipated in miscalculation and hesitation. The predator lowered its massive head toward Noah, a gesture of unspoken triumph. Jonah exhaled, feeling the tension release in a wave that carried relief, awe, and understanding. The apex mind had defended not with rage but with choice. It had shaped the battlefield with intelligence and loyalty, and it had preserved the fragile life at its center. The council's fleet retreated beyond sensor range, leaving Kepri 9 in silence, the settlement intact and the predator still vigilant. Jonah knelt beside Noah, brushing dust from his hair, and understood the final truth of the encounter. The galaxy had been taught a lesson it could not ignore. Humanity did not merely survive apex threats. It forged alliances, redefined expectations, and revealed the true power of choice allied with courage. The predator rumbled softly, acknowledging Jonah and Noah, signaling the silent promise that its vigilance would endure. Jonah looked toward the horizon, toward the distant council and its astonished observers, and allowed himself the first genuine smile since the conflict began. The child, the predator, and the humans who had witnessed it would carry this moment forward, and the galaxy would never see humanity in the same way again. The wind swept across the valley, scattering dust, carrying the quiet echo of strategy, loyalty, and triumph. Jonah tightened his grip on Noah, who laughed softly, a sound unbroken by fear. The predator's eyes glimmered, surveying the land it had protected. Jonah realized then that the story was not merely about survival, but about transformation. Humanity had endured, aligned, and prevailed, not through weapons alone, but through trust, understanding, and the unshakable bond forged between a child and the apex force sworn to guard him. The battle was over, but the legend had only just begun. Jonah looked down at Noah, then at the predator, and whispered, "We've won today, but the galaxy will remember tomorrow." The predator rumbled in affirmation, a living monument to intelligence, loyalty, and the truth the council had refused to see. Underestimate humanity and even the apex forces of the cosmos will bend to their choice.